Hello everyone and welcome to this first tutorial. Before we get into the actual work, I just want to give a really brief overview over Blender and the tools I use. So you can see this is how I have Blender set up. The main window is here, the viewport for modeling. I have the shader menu down here for my materials, and then the navigation tools and the settings here. I also have an extra camera viewer where I'm always going to look through my camera. So when you press the numpad 0, you can center it here. If you press home, you can maximize it. And if we call this menu with N and activate the lock camera to view, it actually stays that way. If you deactivate this, it will not be centered on the camera anymore. So we'll press 0, numpad, home to maximize, and activate this one. And then with N pressing again, we can get rid of that. And with T, this menu here on the side as well. Because this is purely to look through the camera and look at my rendered view. But we don't need that for now, so we can put that away. You can always customize everything in Blender by choosing a different kind of menu item here. So I can look through the UV image editor, the graph editor for my animation, or whatever you want. And then you can move these here around to make them bigger or smaller. To get to the modeling bit, I use for this tutorial very standard modeling tools, nothing special. So just a quick overview. If you press Shift A, you get this menu here. I'll place a cube, and then I can move that around here. In case the gizmo is not activated, you can press here to get it, and then you can move this around. If you take these handles here, you can scale them in one direction. If you want to uniformly scale, you can press S and then make it larger or smaller. If you press Escape, it gets rid of the transform. Another tool I use is, of course, the polygon modeling tools with faces and vertices and edges. So currently we're in object mode. If you press Tab, you switch to the edit mode. Right now you can see it's on the vertices. With pressing 1, 2, 3, you can cycle through it. 2 is edges, 3 is faces. So I can click on it. You might have to reactivate that to move it. And then I can, of course, play with these here. If you press Tab again, you jump out. Other tools I use is duplication tool. So if you have the object selected in object mode, press Shift D, you get this one here, an exact duplicate. It's right now completely free floating, but if you press the middle mouse button, you can constrain it to an axis. Right now it's constrained to the green one. If you press again, you get options to move it up, down, left, right, or in depth. Once it is where I like it, you can get rid of. You can not press the middle mouse button anymore, and then you can shift it along here. And if you press the left mouse button, you can see I placed it here. And that's pretty much the only tools I use in object mode. If I press Tab and I have this one selected, I can also press E for extrude, and then I can place that here. I can press I for inset. You can see how that works. You can also use the duplication tools here. So if I have this selected, I can press Shift D, and now I just have this side. I can press E for extrude, and now I have another block here. if you want to select this entire piece, let's select the other one first. Press Tab. If I press A, I have all sides selected. If I press Alt A, I can deselect everything. But of course, if I'm here and I press A, everything will be selected. If I just want to have this isolated object, I can press this and then I can press L to select all linked items. So these are the basic selection tools. You can also select all faces that are visible to you. So you press B, you get this hair cross, you select everything, and then you can see everything that all the sides facing me were selected. You can also change that here by using a box, a circle, or a lasso. A couple of other things I use is here under Object, Transform, the randomized transform function, or the mirror, but we'll get to that later. So basically for modeling, this is all I really use. And I think we can now get started. Okay, so let's get started here. I'm gonna start with a simple cube, scale it up a bit, extrude it by pressing E a couple of times, extruding different sides. I basically want to start with a simple building block, like a low-lying building that I can populate on the ground. And I'm trying to just get like some random interesting shape that I think would fit the bill. Later on, I'm gonna just take that and skew it and multiply it. So I don't want it to be too complicated. I don't want it to be too heavy. So I'm using the same extrude tool multiple times just by pressing E. Now I'm scaling it down just to get a bit of a breakup. So that looks okay. Pressing Shift D to duplicate. So now I have both of these. And I want to mirror them, but of course I have to duplicate them first. So Shift D again, and then select Object Mirror on the right axis. And then again, Shift D, duplicate. I can select everything by pressing B and then selecting everything, all the objects. So now I'm using the randomized transform. Make sure that all these objects are separate objects in the layer stack. So I can actually duplicate them all and to use the randomized transform. Now I'm actually joined them all by pressing Ctrl J. And so I have it in one block, and now I can duplicate that block more easily. Move them around. Now I can randomize transform them again because they're separate objects. Now I'm selecting them all again, join them together. So now I have a bigger building block I can play with. I do that mainly because I don't want the my layers to be too complicated. I don't want to have too many separate objects. It's just too confusing. So now I'm playing with those, moving them around. I basically want to build a ground plane of buildings, like a general populated area that is more low-lying compared to my massive like downtown core buildings. I'm trying to scale them up, flatten them, get a bit of variety in there, get some little bit of higher buildings, adding a ground plane and scaling it up by pressing S and adjusting the size. Putting a ground plane there just gives me like a 0 level kind of anchor point, after which I can better estimate the height and distribution of my buildings. So I'm just duplicating them with Shift D and moving them around, squishing them. Don't forget to save. So now I'm adding some more buildings. I'm using a block. I want to create not only like a very noisy kind of general level, but also I need some elements that kind of help me to not have everything so noisy. So I want to have some areas that are actually have less of detail. So I want to kind of create like a, I don't know, some kind of wall, some kind of, I don't know, it's probably inspired by some kind of dam, some kind of element that can separate the parts of the town. Again, using extrude with pressing E, that's all I'm doing here, and moving it a bit, so it's not completely straight. I wanted to bring some variety to it, trying to see where it kind of fits, duplicating it multiple times. Maybe I can create some kind of canal. Maybe it can signify, maybe it can separate certain parts of the city from each other. Some can be bigger, some can be flatter. So basically I'm just building blocks that I then can use as kind of my own kit bash. I'm not using any special tools here, nothing I purchased or anything. It's just standard Blender. I'm not using any kit bash parts that I bought. It's all just pieces I built myself and that I can then kit bash with myself. Trying to adjust, trying to get a feel for what kind of city I want to build. Just trying to see where that big dam, that big long building can fit in. I wanted to also give a bit of depth to the city. I need to adjust the visibility, the end of it, to allow for my ever expanding city to be visible in the viewport. So now I'm taking all this, join it again, move it around, scale it up, so you can pretty quickly generate yourself a city. There are other ways to do it, of course, but I don't want to overcomplicate things, so I'm going to stick to my basic tools. Make it longer, allow for the city to grow. Let's add another cube here. And let's try to start building some of our main buildings. I probably want to have some, I don't want to build my main buildings out of these generic blocks. Like the background, yeah, I can do that. But for our main buildings, I still want to design, I want to design some unique buildings that kind of can be the anchor points and the focal points for the city itself. Like any city always has some buildings that are very famous, that are more recognizable and that give a city its identity as well. So I can also take that shape and kit bash a bit with it again. Wanted to add some interest to that angular wall piece that I built. Maybe I'm going to duplicate that later. see what we can do here. I'd like to add some of these pyramid feel kind of buildings. Not everything has to be completely straight. Took some obvious inspiration there from some of the more classic buildings, building and paintings from Sid Mead and some of the famous anime cities of like Akira or Ghost in the Shell. They have some pretty simple but pretty iconic designs there. So I haven't seen these being used much lately, so I just want to mix some of them in there. Of course, some circular buildings as well. I have a couple ideas in mind based on the inspiration and reference that I looked at, so I just want to see what kind of archetypes I can build in here. Again, using the scaling tools, using the extrude tools, nothing more than that, just to get very basic shapes in there. At the scale that we're operating, it's often not so useful to go into a lot of little detail, because we're only going to really see this the skyline of the city from a far distance, so spending a lot of time sculpting little details might not always be the best use of our time, especially if our deliverable is a 2D painting. So we can solve a lot of issues by using smart texturing and also by paint overs. Working a bit on that building. So while it's good to have all these tools available to you, and they're going to really help you, like talking about 3D tools helping you to populate cities quickly and giving you a lot of options, the design part you still need to do yourself. The design of the building, giving it an overall shape. So now I'm going to duplicate that, mirrored it, duplicate it a few more times. Same as always, Shift D, and then you're done. Trying to see where that fits in. So that line down there is kind of like a demarcation line from the lower part of the city to maybe the bigger part. Now I'm trying to add complexity to that circular building by adding several layers of elevation, giving a bit more complexity to that building as well. Not really complexity, but at least giving it a few more subshapes, a few more medium shapes to break up. A good thing will also be that I can give those different elements, of course, different kind of textures to further break up the building itself. So you see how I'm building some skyscrapers that go straight up. I go build some that have like a bit of a pyramid feel, some circular buildings, chamfered buildings. Trying to just get some variety in there. Once I have built enough of those, I can actually go in and kit bash again and squeeze them and randomize them. But I do need a certain amount of a certain amount of different kind of archetype buildings. Trying to see if I can add a bit of soft curves to all of these. But it's not working so well. Sometimes in Blender you have to adjust the scale, or actually reset the scale and rotation of these elements when they're being scaled to that degree to make sure that your bevels and everything, your transformations are not becoming completely out of scale. So this might look good or might not. Not sure yet if I'm going to stick with that. I'm always playing with the proportions of these kind of things to see how the longer edge compares to the shorter edge. That's quite a funky thing. Let's mirror that. Let's put it over here. So now I have a new kind of building that I can use. That looks quite different from the other ones. So maybe I can combine that with a pyramid. Let's go on to the next one. You see, it's the same process again and again. So I'm going to add a few more cubes out of which I can build those buildings. And also it helps me to focus on the big shapes first, which is very important. I need to get an overall feel for the skyline first and worry about the details later. So it helps your brain, I think, to just wrap your head around what you're doing. It might often feel too abstract since we have to often go quite slowly or do a lot of technical tasks that maybe don't feel too creative at the moment by blocking out this city in 3D. So let's see what kind of different surfaces we can generate. Got some round ones, got some chamfered ones, some angled, some thick, some thin. So I'm looking for that kind of balance. Because just like in real life, you look at buildings. They're not all the same in a city, right? So they're built by different people, different developers, different architects. And often they all kind of want to outdo each other, try to build the tallest building in the city. Let's see what we can do with this one. Not everything always works, so sometimes you're trying something out and then you realize it doesn't work, so you go back. There's a lot of design decisions we need to make on an ongoing basis, and not everything's great. I'm concerned about the variety. I'm concerned about what kind of in-between spaces it generates by having these kind of different buildings stand next to each other. It's going to be quite clustered. So you're going to have a lot of low-lying buildings together. You're going to have a lot of high-rise buildings together, just like how it works in a real city. So we want to play with those associations that we have of the human experience by living in these cities, by seeing them on pictures, and then we have to see what kind of similar associations we can evoke by building an imagined city. So again, I'm kit bashing here. I'm moving this down. I'm going to create some kind of entrance, some kind of focal point for this big building. It's very important to consider the scale, the proportions of the various parts of these buildings. to each other, and also of course to of the buildings themselves. So the rhythm, the proportions, how big the entrance is compared to the overall facade is going to be very important. Trying out some more things here, but it doesn't really look good, so I'm just going to leave it probably. It's hard to know in this kind of process what is worth spending a lot of time on and what is not. You might end up doing a lot of work for a particular building, but then you're never going to see it in the end. But sometimes you just won't be able to know that until much later. You're going to get a feel for that once you do this a lot of times. So I'm probably going to finish the rest of these buildings here. And then we'll see if we can duplicate those. Duplicate them as a whole and see how far we get. So I can select them all. Then let's see what the randomized transform gives us. And we can duplicate the whole thing. And again, object, transform, randomized, transform. And squeeze them and stretch them. I'm not too precious about any kind of geometry. There's not going to be any UVs involved or anything. It's all going to be box mapping. Going to move them around and see how they fit in between the rest of my buildings. I'll try to mirror it so it's not so obvious that it's just the same kind of buildings, just copied and slightly skewed. So I'm trying to now go back in and adjust some of the scale. I used a randomized transform, and some of the shapes kind of are not so nice anymore, so I'm just going to go back in and fix it. It's always important to remember that the randomizing cannot do everything for you. You always need to go back in and adjust it so that it looks better. So now I want to build some more pyramids. I think it's quite a nice feature that I haven't seen too much lately. Of course, it's very iconic in movies like Blade Runner, that they had a very prominent pyramid feature. I kind of found these slopes very interesting. These massive slopes set against the very vertical buildings. I'm kind of jumping in between buildings. When I see something I want to fix, I'll fix it right away, and then I jump from it to a different building. See what we can do here with again, some kind of pyramid shape, maybe some kind of supports. See if that makes any sense to put a tower on top. Kind of looks like a weird tripod, so kind of get rid of that. Again, things to try out. See if anything works. I want to get that slope in there somehow, but I don't think with this piece it's gonna work. I always thought about if I should leave these kind of things in the video. I could have edited it out easily, but I think it's important to show that not everything is perfect at the first try. There's a lot of decisions you have to make, and sometimes it's just not going to be good. It's not like everything is perfect. It's not like we never make any mistakes. We make plenty of mistakes. It's just about realizing when it's better to erase that kind of stuff and move on to something that's going to be looking better. So I'm scaling up here. I'm going bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're far from done yet. So we're going to scale up and make it even bigger. So just when you think it couldn't get any bigger, you should probably make it even more huge. Let's get some more funky shapes in there. Stuff you don't necessarily see. Let's add some kind of backdrop to the massive buildings here and show that it's becoming even more massive. It looks kind of like it's going up a mountain, which is kind of interesting. Maybe we can add to that. I'm not going to do too much on the sides of it because I'm going to focus my main camera work on the skyline, on the buildings down there. So I'll keep it relatively flat where I want to position my camera so it doesn't get in the way. So now we're getting a better feel for the entire city, I think, for at least the part we want to do some renders of later. Now that I've created such a variety of buildings here, even though they're very, very simple, very, very simple geometry, I want to see how much I can get out of it by kit bashing with all of those parts I built. If I do too much modeling itself, I tend to use the same kind of shapes all the time. It's always going to be the same kind of design choices I make. So using these parts as kit bash or using them with like a randomizer or something like that will kind of loosen me up and give me results that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise. So combining those two things with like more deliberate design process and helping you to get new shapes with randomizers is a nice way to kind of balance those two worlds out, to make sure that you don't always arrive at something very generic, at least for your own standards, but not something that's completely useless and random. Kind of using those shapes to stack them on top of each other. Trying to create some roofs, some cavities, almost like secondary shapes to my overall primary shapes. But still keeping it simple. I'm not going to do any very detailed modeling. So it's starting to look halfway decent. We're getting to a point where we can focus a bit more on some of the subtleties. There's still some stuff I like to do, I think, with the part in front, more towards the ground. Well, for now, I'm taking care of some of the rooftops. I'm going to show that later as well, but the way you reset the scale and the rotation is by pressing Control A and then selecting scale and rotate. It will play a big role later when we're going to texturing. We want to make sure that all the scale for our buildings is set to 1, so we can use a universal kind of box mapping. Otherwise, all our buildings, all our textures will be scaled differently depending on the scale of the building. And it also helps with the transform tools, so if you want to do extrudes or insets, it will not go crazy. Now I copied that back part. Gonna make quickly another low-lying part of the city. See if I can stack this dam kind of, the slope. Maybe I can stack it on top of each other, scale it, create a bit of complexity by having these shapes overlap without really building anything new. So it creates quite a nice rhythm here. One feature for the cities, I think, which is quite important, is some kind of street, some kind of infrastructure. So I'm going to create some kind of bridges that I can then put a road texture on top. And I'm going to duplicate that a couple of times. So just to indicate that, okay, this is how the people get from one part to the other. The rest you probably wouldn't see as it's somewhere down there. Or people use flying cars or whatever. So I'm going to duplicate that again and rotate it a little bit to have it at an angle. Maybe some like more prominent bridges that I can add here. Let's see how those fit in. Of course, some of these things I'm going to adjust later on as well. Once I see how everything will look like when it's rendered, or while I'm doing my look development in Eevee, I'm going to see what works, what doesn't. And the good thing is I can change everything on the fly without really any delay. So there were a lot of empty areas which I wanted to fill up. Again, the city grows, so I need to make sure it holds up in all areas. Like extend our little canal bridge thing here. I'll have some higher buildings kind of like singled out, standing on the other side of this kind of causeway. Fill in the gaps. The good thing is that all my geometry is very low resolution, so I can just duplicate and duplicate without really any slowdown in performance for now. I'll add some more of these big pieces to really allow for the growing scale of my building. Maybe there's like different levels of elevation way further up. It kind of helps to break up the shapes, helps to break up the monotony of all these like just straight up skyscrapers. I'm going to try to place these. It doesn't really matter too much. I think I'm not going to spend that much time flying around up there, since my main buildings that I want to take care of are all kind of in front. but these are going to be more like background kind of things. I mean, nice to create some overhangs, some cantilevers, and of course just increase the scale, make it bigger. Now, these kind of things are actually, they're kind of there to block out the background. Like, they're supposed to not be anything in particular, but just like block out the background so you can't see whatever there is, and it saves me time because I don't have to paint it out. It kind of blocks the, I don't know, if you're using an HDRI or whatever, or any kind of emptiness that will block out. Let's add a few more roads. Again, move tool, extrude, rotate, scale, all the very, very basic tools. There's nothing fancy in here, nothing hidden that I'm not telling you about. If you watch this in real time, it would be terribly boring because nothing much happens. It's all about design decisions, shapes that I can express with very simple geometry. So it's just really it all starts with boxes or cylinders. So let's see if we can get kind of in between, like filling in some gaps with like some medium, small kind of buildings that are kind of peeking out to give the idea of different kinds of districts. Maybe towards where the bigger buildings are, there's going to be some smaller buildings that are still a bit higher. I'm intending to give most of the complexity by using textures, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now I'm making last-minute adjustments to all the geometry pieces. Again, it will change later on, depending on how I can get the textures to work. But for now, I think that's we're getting to a good jumping off point. Again, need to reset rotation and scale with Control A. Just adding a little bit of stuff here on top of the roofs. Create some kind of overhang, some kind of secondary detail. So that it's just not that simple cylinder. I'm going to do that for all of these roofs here. Well, that's about as much detail as I'm going to get into during the modeling process. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, see you in the next one. Okay, so now we're actually coming to quite a boring part, but that is nevertheless very, very necessary. So I need to reset the rotation and scale, like I said before, for every single object. And I don't know, but for some reason I can't select them all and do it, and it kind of doesn't work. Maybe there's a way, maybe some Blender expert can teach that to me and you guys, but I don't know any other way. So that's why this video is quite sped up a lot more. I just select every object, press Ctrl A and say reset rotation and scale. I need to make sure that on the right side where it says scale on the transform menu there, that it says 1, 1, 1 and all the rotation is 0, 0, 0. And yeah, I have to do that for everything. And then I should be done in a second. There you go. I think there still might be one or two that are kind of like somewhere that I haven't found them. But now we can actually start assigning materials. So you kind of have to think about how many materials you want to do, how many you need. So you can select an object, and then in the right side you select the material folder, and then you say new material and you give it a name, and then it will appear down there in the shader editor. So I decided that there is going to be about 4 materials for the buildings. So there's going to be 2 different kind of like materials on the side. There's going to be some kind of light, stronger light emitting material. There's going to be a rooftop material, something for on top of the roads. And I think that's about it. You can assign different materials to an object by going into edit mode by pressing tab and then selecting the faces that you want, and then in the material options on the right you can click on the plus, and then you can select the material you want to assign. You select it and then you press assign to that face, and then it's going to be assigned. So you can add as many different materials as you want for any given object. Again, you rinse, repeat the same process. Again, click on the object, select the material, or create a new one. Go into the edit mode, select the face, and add a new material and assign it. And now again, as before with the resetting of the rotation and the scale, I need to actually go into every building, into every object, select it and assign the material. So it's a bit tedious, but it gives me time to really think about where what material is supposed to go. So in between these kind of crevices, I want to have the light emitting material. So, and of course on the rooftops I want to have the rooftop material. I will need to think about what kind of rhythm that will create once I hit the render button, right? Again, it's not going to be the final. I'm going to have to adjust a lot of the material assignments once I actually get into the render mode, but I need some kind of starting off point. So I select whatever I think will give me a good result. I have 2 building materials because of course there needs to be some variety. It can't be all the complete same material. It's going to be quite boring. But of course there also shouldn't be too different. I don't want to create like massive contrasts between them. They should still kind of make sense together. Again, selecting everything first, and then later on I'll go in and assign different materials to the different faces. It might look tedious, and it is, but it actually does not take that long. Again, maybe there's a smarter way of doing this. I haven't found any yet. But again, that I have to slow down and kind of do this one by one kind of gives me also an opportunity to think about what I'm actually doing. Adjusting a little bit, maybe I'll add like a ring there that has a different material. Again, continue. Maybe I even want to break the set of rules I set myself and put maybe a light emitting material on top. That can also be the case. But of course, all of this kind of follows the kind of decision I made before, that the kind of city I want to have, right? And the kind of feel and the kind of time of day it's supposed to have, right? I mean, I'm putting in a lot of lights and I want to create that kind of like night feeling with a really massive lit up city that creates a lot of like bloom and a lot of atmosphere, and that really glows, right? So you kind of have to kind of know what you want beforehand. Blender is not going to tell you what kind of, it's not going to dictate what kind of city you're going to do. So you have to, again, like with any design project, you have to have your reference, you have to have your overall vision of what you want to do. And then it will actually have to follow like whatever decisions you make here in terms of texturing, in terms of even maybe for the kind of materials you assign is going to have a different consequence depending on the kind of references you pulled out. So a lot of the things, again, I'm not 100% sure how it's going to look like in the end, but I want to assign at least something to all of these things and see what kind of result that's going to have. I'm kind of going with my gut a little bit here. Again, your gut feeling will improve as you do this more often. And you will know what kind of decisions to make, what kind of materials to assign, what kind of buildings. But again, we can change everything later on, right? Again, it's not like we're setting everything in stone here, right? We're just building a starting off point. And we should always be open to change everything completely later if it just doesn't work, which might be the case. Might look completely awful, but we should at least try to give it a go. So it's going to get harder to find buildings that haven't had any material assigned or not correctly assigned. And we do this again and again and again. And now here in the back, it's actually a bit more free. Like I don't need to have exact materials allocated for everything. So I can kind of use this top view, and I can use the selection tool to kind of select all upwards facing faces and give that the roof material, and the rest I can give like a building material. It's not perfect, and at least not in this view, and all the pieces that add a slope or whatever that I not necessarily want to have the roof material assigned to will also be selected. But I'm less precious about this kind of stuff. Like it doesn't really matter, because in most cases we're not going to be able to notice if everything is really correctly assigned. And again, I kind of want to get this done quickly, and it would really be not very efficient if I go in to select every single house, every single roof there. For the big buildings, I think it makes sense to have a more careful selection process, but for these big ones, I think it's fine. I think we're getting to the end here. Again, to make the selection thing, you press B and then you draw a rectangle over it. That's it. So now let's actually slowly get started with Eevee. So like I showed you in the beginning, I have this little viewer here, which is for my camera. So I need to get into the camera settings and also adjust. I need to select the camera and the layer stack, go to the camera settings and have the kind of lens I want, and also set the clipping and start and an end. Depending on how big your scene is, you need to make sure that it's within that clipping area. Like I showed you before, to set up the viewer, right? You press numpad 0, you press home to center it, and you activate the little checkbox to say you have to lock the view to the screen. And then now we actually have a camera viewer. So let's quickly set up the material for the world, or the setup for the world. So in our shader editor, we go to world. On the right side, in that little world icon, we say use nodes. And now you see that we have these two nodes here in the shader editor, the world output and the background color. Well, and more about that in the next one. Hello. So here we are at the Eevee part now. On the right side, make sure that as render engine Eevee is selected. And we want to enable simplify, screen space reflections, ambient occlusion, and bloom. And to volumetrics, I'm going to get in a second. So make sure that those are enabled for the best possible result. And I switched over at the viewport. I switched to the most right option in the top right corner, the shading part. And now, as you remember from the last one, I had my world nodes set up. So now I can actually go in and change the color of my environment. I have a light source in there, which I can move in real time, and you can see how it changes. I can go to my light source if I have it selected in the layer stack and change the intensity, the energy of my light source to something lower or to something very bright. You can see how everything is affected in real time. And I'm still able to move my camera. I'm able to manipulate any object in there, which makes this really powerful. So you can see I can play with the intensity of my of the environment color, make it really dark, for example. Just testing how everything looks. And now I can also get in an HDRI. So with Shift A, you're able to put in environment texture. So I can load one in. You can get lots of free ones off the internet. If you connect that to the color, you can see how it's right away displayed. I can play with the strength as well to get something more what I would expect from a nighttime image. You can see I'm playing around a bit with what kind of effect the options have. I can also go in, since it's a nodal interface, I can go in and play with the values of the HDRI, so I can bring in like a hue saturation node. I can play with the hue and the contrast and all sorts of things to manipulate my image right in there. So I can also change the brightness and contrast. See what kind of effect that has. So it's a fun little thing to play around with. It will have quite a big impact once we actually play around with our materials and once we get a certain amount of reflectivity in there. So for now, I just wanted to demonstrate it so I can show you what effect it has, but we'll plug it in later again if you need it. Now I want to put in a different light. We can also put in an area light, so you can see I'm manipulating it in the perspective view, and I can see the effect in the camera viewer. So I chose an area light, made it really, really bright, and changed the color so I can see how it affects my scene. So here I'm just putting the lights in a different collection. Collections is kind of a grouping of different objects. So when you select the object, you press M, you can assign a new collection to it so you can find it more easily. So I put all my lights and all my cameras usually in separate collections and all my objects, so I can find whatever I need easily. So you will also see that the bloom effect will have some repercussions for what you see, how much the light will bloom, well, essentially. I'm also want to show you volumetrics, of course. So we need a volume scatter node that we plug into the volume output. Let's do that one more time. Plug it in here into the volume. And then we need to play with the density, and we also need to play with the color. It kind of works in the inverse. So if you choose a white color there, it's going to be completely black. If you choose, like I did here, a purplish color, you will get the complementary greenish color. If you make it darker, there's going to be a lighter kind of fog. And of course, with the density, you can play around with how thick the fog is supposed to be, and the lights will be affected by the fog, so you can see how everything changes in the viewer when I manipulate the lights. It's a completely uniform kind of environment fog in this case. So it's fun to play around with all the settings to get exactly the kind of look that you want to achieve. So let's start looking at some of the lights. I want to change this from the standard shader as a principled BSDF shader. I want to change that to, I just tried out to change it to like a plain emission shader. So I plug that in, and then I see how that it's gonna be changed immediately to something that emits light, and the color I specify in the node. So I'm also seeing that I assigned some of the materials wrong, so I'll need to go in and fix some stuff. Just making sure that everything else works. So you can kind of see that starting to get an idea of what my material setup could look like. So this is all the areas where I plugged in that light material that I assigned the light material to. Now I can make the strength, of course, more. I can play with the bloom in the Eevee settings to determine how much it should really have the light blooming around it. So depending on the look I'm after, there can be more or less. Because of the greenish fog that's in the scene, the light will look very, very greenish if I'm just leaving it white. So I can try to make it look a bit more, give it a bit warmer temperature by changing it to like an orangey color. So of course that will completely change once I change the color of my fog. So keep that in mind. That's already quite an interesting look. Maybe not really the one I'm after, but there's a lot of possibilities of what we can do with this. I just wanted to give a quick tip here on how to achieve box mapping. I realized I didn't record that part, so I wanted to splice it in. It's very simple, but it's something that you have to kind of learn, just simply learn how to do in Blender. So you have this setup here, which is the standard material. If I press Shift A and add my image texture, you can open your file here, connect the color to the base color or any other channel. But of course, if you do that, it would by standard use the UV mapping. In order to achieve a global box mapping, which is kind of what I want to use most of the time, we need a couple more nodes. So first of all, we need to go to input texture coordinate. Then we need to go to vector transform. With this one, we're telling the mapping that it should not use the object. So we want to, following the input, we tell it to transform it from an object to a world transformation. And then we need vector mapping. You can change this to texture, and then we plug this in. So now it's actually going to be using box mapping on a global scale. We also need to change the projection to box, don't forget that. But now it's not going to take the scale of the object into consideration, but it's going to take a global scale. It's going to scale every texture on every object the same way. So that's what you need to do. And back to the main video. Okay, so now we have our box mapping node plugged in. I just showed you how to do that. So we'll select some of the images that that you can also play with, that I included in the package here. So we'll see how that looks like. I'm just trying to fix a few buildings that seemingly don't have anything assigned. So now I want to see how I put a concrete texture in there, and I'm playing with the scale of it. I want to kind of know what kind of scale I'm dealing with in my scene. How much you have to scale it up or down really depends on how big your scene is. So you need to experiment with that until it shows up. So I can also, like the same way as I played around with the environment texture, I can place in several kind of operators in the color menu, as like brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, the gamma of it. So I can really right there manipulate the colors and various factors of my nodes without having to go back into like Photoshop or something. I also can take that same node and duplicate it with Shift D and plug in a different texture to plug it, for example, into the roughness node, and then I'll get all these crazy reflections depending on the black or white values in that image. So it works pretty similar to I mean, other node-based PBR kind of texture programs. So you can see that I have a pretty dirty, like rough, grungy image in there, and I'll create all these broken up reflections. So now I'm just trying out a couple of different images to see what kind of effect that has. This is a pretty cool texture that will allow me to like add some kind of like tiling in there. So a lot of it is playing around, I think, with certain kind of textures. So now let's slow down actually to see what's going on here. It's gonna get a bit more complicated, and but the result's gonna come out pretty quickly. So I just have I just plugged it in the other texture also on the specular channel. You can experiment with that, but I also want to have some sort of light emission coming out of it, and so while I'm still playing with the reflectivity here, I kind of move always the camera to see what comes out, what kind of result it has. But in order to achieve the emission, I want to actually create a mix shader. So go to shader, mix shader, and so on the one side I'm going to have my material here, the shiny surface material, but I can also plug in a mix shader, which is going to create a mixture of course, two different materials. So I'm going to plug in an emission on the other side, and instead of having the emission be just like a full-on uniform emission, I'm going to have it controlled through a texture. And the way it works is that whatever is white there, white in the image, will emit light, and depending on how white it is, it will emit more light. If it's black, it's not going to emit anything. So I'm going to choose one of the textures that are packaged here, and then you can see how that affects the overall emission. So I can control these again, of course, through the color correction nodes. So the way it works is that I want to create a very, very high contrast image with very little white in it. So I'm going to choose the brightness and contrast ones node through which I can really control how dark it is, and I have to push it quite a bit. So you can see the kind of effect I'm getting here by having it really, really dark. I can, now it's of course all purple because I'm really pushing the brightness and contrast here. But through a hue saturation node, I can then control also the color of the light I'm emitting here. So you can see now it's like an orangey light. You have to kind of play around with the settings depending on the kind of images you use. So there's no blanket approach to this. You need to experiment until you get the desired effect, if the image is then suitable, right? Sometimes an image will not work, and then you gotta find another one. But you can see the effect it has here. You can have it brighter, and you can have it less bright and emit more light. So it depends also on the order of the nodes, which comes after what. So you can get some really funky abstract results, which is also pretty cool. But I think I'm more after something subtle, right? So it's already working pretty well, actually. The tiling is something we have to take care of later. You can see that it's already getting a very, very interesting effect for the surface. And then you have to play around with the values ever so slightly in smaller and smaller increments to really dial down. And you can see that we're getting actually very nice, reflective, interesting texture here that is achieved through partially the reflective material that I've set up in the principled shader, and also through the mixture of having the light emissive shader down there. So what you can also do is very easily copy parts of the shader tree and then bring it to another part, another new shader. So I don't want to have to set up my box mapping all the time. So I copy the nodes that I need and paste it into something else. So I want to have a similar shader for my light emission, but I wanted to, of course, manipulate it. So I'll just copy the entire tree there and up to the part I'm needing it. And of course, since I call it light, I want to have more light emitted here, but I also want it to not be just uniform. I also wanted to have some kind of structure, some kind of identity. So I change the scaling. I play with the nodes for the color correction to get something different. And of course, I want to have it be a stronger light, so I'll pump up the emission. Another cool thing you can do is that was a mistake. Another cool thing you can do is play with the have the amount that how this texture is blended between the two shaders. You can control it via a texture as well. So can control it through the same texture that causes the reflection, for example, but just add a different kind of color manipulator to it to achieve a different result. So that way you can introduce some randomness, or you can break up basically like the repetitiveness of textures, and you can get rid of the tiling, for example, more easily. So now I want to definitely bring back that emissive quality, since we're kind of trying to build like a mega city here. So that's a bit too funky maybe, but I don't know, maybe for others it's not. So it's you can get quite a wide variety of effects out of this one. So that's actually the fun part about this, that you can get such insane results. And sometimes it's just nice to look at the shininess of something in real time. So again, let's play with the values, right? And see how we can get the result that we want to achieve. There's still a lot to fix, but I think once we kind of solve the major problems with this shader, it's easy enough to copy paste it and have this as a jumping off point for the other shaders. That will make our life a lot easier than building shaders completely from scratch every single time. So you see, sometimes it takes a bit of figuring out how this could work the best way, how to arrange the nodes the best. If you want to go after very abstract things, you can plug in stuff like noise generators, which is very cool. Not really useful for what we're doing here, but it's maybe something to explore for another lesson. So it's a very interesting, cool result we already have here. can play with a mixture of it. It creates kind of a dirty look, and depending on the kind of texture you have in there, that mixes both textures, you can get a dirty result or something cleaner. And of course, you can also completely change the scaling of it, the scaling of the textures, by plugging in a new mapping node. So we preserve our box mapping, but we just are able to individually change the scale of the texture. And of course also the manipulating stuff like brightness and contrast can help us get a different kind of fusion of these images. So now I can of course go back and manipulate the principled shader. So you see the kind of result it gets. And now you cannot really see the tiling that strongly anymore. So that's one way to get around it without actually having to play around with the JPEG files or the texture files themselves. So I want to think further on how I can break up that tiling issues and how I can bring in more variety with what I have without really adding new images or doing anything else. So I can actually bring in like a checker texture. Well, it's like a checkerboard, and it's gonna alternate between two different kinds of images that I can plug in. So I have two channels, and just imagine it like a chessboard. So you have black and white, and you can plug in one in the white channel, one in the black channel, kind of, and then it again creates it can create some variety. And also depending on where you plug in that texture, it will create different kinds of effects, and you can reuse other textures. So whatever I used up there for the specularity, for the base color and our principled shader, I can just plug that in by connecting it into the checker texture. So now you see I plugged in a different texture there, and it changes the look of it fairly dramatically. So I think we're really getting somewhere with this. And now you see I finally plugged in that node at the right place, and now I can really get that result which I wanted. Create this really busy looking massive city with just a few simple textures, and not having it look like it tiles at all, which is exactly what I wanted. It's easy to make a lot of connections, and then your shader tree gets really, really messy. And so I'd like to just spend like a few seconds here to clean that up, so I kind of can follow what's going on. I mean, this is nothing compared to what other people out there build, but I'd like to get the result that works for me as simple as possible without delving too deeply into this very technical aspect of image making. So I just copied actually the entire network and put it into my other building material. As I said before, I don't want to start from scratch again. I kind of want to build on what I already have because I know it works, and I want to manipulate it from there. So I create some alternatives that feel similar but are quite different, and give some variety to my scene, because it wouldn't look good if everything is completely the same. Always make sure to test and to have a look on how everything is working so far. I'm sure I missed a few buildings here or there, but we'll take care of those later. So let's see how we can manipulate the other building shader. maybe I want it to be differently mixed. Maybe I wanted to have a stronger light emission, a different kind of pattern to it, introduce color accents by playing with the various sliders. Now you have actually a lot of options that you can play around with to give some variety to this. And of course you can change the scaling. You can also add more materials if you want. But I kind of like it that it's creating a stronger emission here. Not quite as strong as my light material, but it will help to break up the monotony of it. So now I just switched to a better view. I hope you can see it a bit better. Sorry I didn't do that before, but I kind of just got really sucked into the work, so it should be maybe a bit more visible. So yeah, I can play with, I have so many controls now for the scale. I can plug in different kind of materials, even though it might not look very good. But I think it's always, it just takes a few seconds. It's always worth a try. Getting that real-time feedback though is really, really helpful in making these kind of decisions. And I mean, there are other very fast GPU renderings solutions out there, but having it this fast does change things a little bit, I think. I can just operate like really, really fast, make changes really, really fast. So you need to kind of get a feeling for what each slider does, how it will change the overall look of it. And of course you need to kind of trust yourself to make some good decisions. It's ever more important that with all these functionality and the speed with which we can make these changes, that we still focus on getting good results and making sound design decisions, and actually also sticking with some decisions, because if you have so many options, it's really hard to like to focus on something. So here is another one. It's not the checker, but now it's the brick texture. Also pretty cool. You have a lot of controls here for the kind of brick layout you can use. Of course, here I'm not really using bricks per se, but I'm just trying to find a different way to to get variety in there. And surprisingly, this worked really well, so I'm kind of going to stick with it. There's other generators that you can use, and they're really, really good as well. And yeah, brick doesn't always mean brick, so it kind of works here. It's really the country here of happy accidents, which, I mean, some people are more comfortable with that than others, but it's a fun place to be. Again, let's copy some parts of it out, and let's work on something else. So I kind of want to work on the roads a little bit. I have an idea, and I want to see if it actually works. So it would be very cool to have these like these light streaks that you get from long exposure photographs, but have them actually as a texture on there. I'm going to do that later though. So that's kind of like a teaser. I'm going to quickly jump to the roofs and see what I can do there. I need something that kind of fits, but is also a bit different, so that I kind of get a different feel when I look at these at the image from different angles. Maybe I want to add more reflectivity. Maybe I want to add less reflectivity. Sometimes the computer is choking up a bit. That will happen. Helps to deactivate and reactivate Eevee sometimes. Eevee is driven by the graphic card that is driving your display. So if you have any kind of different solutions of like external GPUs or whatever, it will actually completely ignore that. It will also completely ignore whatever you have in your cycles render engine settings. Eevee will purely use what is driving your display. So that can sometimes be a drawback. So now you can see how we can change the look of our city, playing around with the roof texture. I'm not going to introduce any new textures or anything. I'm just going to work with those that I have. It's a good exercise to see how far you can actually get with those, but of course it's also maybe a bit limiting, because you would ignore some maybe pretty cool solutions otherwise. But I want to kind of limit my tool set here a bit to show you how far you can actually get. Of course, you can see we're also hitting kind of our limits with the kind of geometry we built, and the simplicity of the setup actually. So we would need to definitely do some paint overs on that kind of stuff later on. And we have to be quite smart, I think, with our camera angles that we want to choose for our final renders, to make it look as good as possible and hide some of the shortcomings of this kind of setup. So I'm just continuing to play with the scale, with the textures, the settings. Let's try if I can do a different kind of more complicated mix shader. It's nothing new that I'm introducing here. I'm just again duplicating nodes, trying to see if I can get a nicer effect. Maybe I want to try some kind of bump effect to give a bit of depth to my surface, but with this kind of reflectivity and everything, it's probably not going to be very useful to do that. Probably going to work more for rough surfaces. There's no actual displacement in the sense that we know it from like Octane or anything. That doesn't work yet in Eevee. So you're not going to be able to actually like do any crazy displacements or anything to get that greeble look that's so popular right now. So this is going to work a bit differently. So we have to kind of work around that. So you see, sometimes experimentation gets is faster, sometimes it's slower. I think we're getting some interesting complex results here. And I also, like you saw before, I applied that roof material also to some of the sides of the buildings accidentally, and it actually creates some nice variety. Maybe introduce some more colors, wouldn't be bad as well. Okay, so I think we're slowly getting somewhere. Play around with a bit more, but I think we can leave this for now, get back to it later. So we should finally maybe have a look around our city. We haven't seen it in a while. The big buildings in the back. So it's looking pretty cool already. Of course, we can see the limitations. We didn't build that far in the distance. So we can also start playing around maybe with the fog a bit more. See what kind of effect that has. Some issues still, but I think we can address those later. Pretty abstract, which is interesting. We'll get around to fixing that later. Let's fix the other shaders first before we get into the overall look of it. So I want to do the roads next. And like I said before, it would be cool to get these kind of like light streaks in there. So as before, I'm gonna build a mixed shader out of it and have a texture control the emission. So I'm wondering if you can achieve these kind of streaks, most likely by stretching the texture along the geometry like massively, and also probably scaling it up a bit. So we'll see if we have any success with that. I could probably get it with another texture, but I kind of, again, want to use what I have. Play with the hue saturation so I get that typical like white and red look from the cars coming and going. Let's see if we can get that a bit clearer. There you go. That looks pretty interesting already. Nice contrast. Can also change the color of it. But I kind of want to have that typical look. I think working pretty well. So I'm getting back here to the world shader again and trying to figure out how we can have some cool environment fog, or how we can influence the atmosphere a bit more. There's some things that if you push your textures too hard, it will kind of break if you add too much contrast. And then you have lights and HDRI and everything in your scene. It kind of will create these like really dark artifacts that kind of don't recede in the distance very well. So we need to kind of find a way on how we can make this look okay without having these artifacts like you can see in the back. So we can either like make it really black, or we can actually try to disable certain things. You can, I mean, it's an interesting look, but not, again, really what I'm after. So maybe there's a more elegant way on getting around this that I'm not aware of. I'll experiment with various things here, like let's see if we can like put a light in it. See how that affects everything. Because the fog is quite thick, so it has a hard time like shining through. So you get this really faint reddish light. Again, it's more like really like look development that we're doing here, almost. Trying to solve a technical problem more than anything. It actually creates some interesting effects as well, though. And again, we always have to be open for like happy accidents. It's to arrive at the final look. I think it's quite a strong interplay between the emissive quality, like how much you make things glow, how much bloom there is, how thick the fog is, and all these kind of things will actually result in very different kinds of looks. So we kind of have to always activate these things in tandem. So you see how the look now is very different with that very thick fog, but there's like really strong emission from that second building texture. So it's quite a cool look, actually. Very stylized, maybe a bit more like evil kind of feeling. It doesn't seem like a happy place anymore, if it ever did. So you can see how kind of having the light in there kind of breaks the texture, because I added probably too much contrast in there. I could probably try to find a way around that by adding less contrast, or I can figure out a different way on how to light this. Maybe I'll skip the lights completely and simplify the setup a bit more. So changing the kind of lights, the texture of the color of the light also will have an effect. I kind of feel like I want to have some variety in there still in terms of colors, so I don't want it to be too orange or too green. I kind of want to have a bit of a balance, even though I really like monotone looking stuff. But maybe all this gives some of you guys some interesting ideas on what to do. So it's turned out quite cool, this entrance there. That worked out well. You see, if you turn down the density now of the fog, it becomes complete and utter craziness. Because the emissions, the strength of the light is so incredibly strong. I'm also trying to get a bit of a feel of what angles could actually look cool that I'm going to shoot later. So there's definitely some nicer areas, some nicer shots that I can get in our skyline here. The reason I place these lights is basically I want to place them in between buildings. I want to get a separation between these kind of buildings, so I can add different layers of like fog and atmosphere in between to push the depth of it. So again, I'm trying to get a bit of variety in here. That's why I'm playing around with these values here. I don't want to have everything like so red. I need to consider all these different options I have now. They're all playing together. But I think the atmosphere is too thick as to that any other light could get out here. So yeah, you see how this will really influence everything. Also the brightness, of course, will have a big effect on how it will look. And sometimes the difference in whether it looks good or not is really a fraction of the values that we're playing with here. It's often not like the difference between 0.5 and 1. It's sometimes a difference between 0.001 and 0.002. So we need to really be patient and play around with this kind of stuff a lot until we get the desired effect of this. So now it's actually pretty interesting. Trying to get we lowered the volume scatter to a degree that actually some other colors can pop through, but we still have a little bit of atmosphere in here. I think there's a pretty we're getting there slowly. So as much as I would like to show you like a straightforward A to Z kind of do this, do that kind of tutorial, but I think seeing that this is as much a exploration as it is a controlled way of working, I think will hopefully help you a bit more that to understand how we actually work. We need that balance of happy accidents and design experience to come up with new ideas, but also control the chaos that is kind of in front of us here. And I hope it helps to show you the entire design process and hopefully get a bit of an idea of the thinking process that's behind it. So I'm like moving my camera here, and it almost feels like I want to like animate this kind of camera, which of course you can do, and let it play in real time. So I think there's already a lot of cool possibilities of things we can do here. So I'm trying to move the camera around, try to see if there's any cool shots that I can already do something with any areas where I can maybe improve the textures, or generally trying to figure out what my next steps could be. So sometimes you get really lost when it's too dark, so I needed to turn on the regular viewport so I could see where I am. So this kind of part is again very nice. It's this accidental brick texture that happened there. I feel though that there's too much of the first texture, the first building texture applied, so I might want to actually go in and bring a bit more variety into this cityscape. And I think I can simply do that by applying the different materials I have in a better proportion to each other. So you can see the fog is actually quite thick, so I have to go quite close, and some of the buildings are just completely disappearing in the distance. They're kind of there, but of course I'm not able to see them at all because the light can't come through. And if I increase the emission, then the lights that are closer to camera are gonna be completely blown out. And there's some pretty interesting angles we can later on play with. So a lot of this stuff is, of course, I never intended to do that, right? I'm never intended to have these kind of shots, but it kind of happened to be there through all the random bashing of cubes and how the texture is applied, and maybe any kind of mistakes I made, or again happy accidents. But it's there, we need to realize it's there, and we need to take advantage of it. You can see on a close-up and in a lot of angles this will actually not work at all, but I think for the kind of angles that we the kind of angles that I'm already kind of realized that are going to work well, like this kind of view, I think for in that sense we can definitely get something useful out of that. So overall, I think it's working quite well together. You get some really cool, interesting, almost abstract shots out of it. So now, yeah, let's go in and select some faces of some buildings and change it and try to get basically a better graphic read out of this by having a better interplay of very bright textures and very dark textures, and to see if we can get a bit more structure into this city, because often, like here in the back, like it just disappears. Gotta see if we can add something to it. So I think it could work quite well with what we have already. I don't think we need to add anything new. You'll have this file as well to play around with it and to maybe re-engineer some of these textures as well and to analyze how I built those shaders. Here and there we'll see that I didn't reset some of the scale of it or the rotation of it. Here, like add a light material instead of a roof material could be cool. Forgot some parts. I decided to add some parts. So yeah, overall I think it's definitely improving the readability, doing all these kind of things. Somehow in the background the pyramid had maybe a bad kind of material applied, or not a very useful one. So if I actually play with that, could yield some very interesting results. That's actually pretty cool. It actually provides a very interesting new kind of possibility, a new better read actually. So maybe that's also a cool pointer for people wondering about the design process for this kind of stuff. Yeah, a lot of stuff happens accidentally last minute and it turns out to be life-saving. Not that we were in big trouble before, but sometimes you have really interesting, cool ideas last minute, and it all just kind of comes together when you least expect it. So that pyramid actually also looks really, really cool. So I can't wait to really get in there and take a lot of different shots. So for the last few minutes, I'll just try to break up some of the shapes more, do the same, like apply different kind of materials. And then we are pretty much done with this one. So that is kind of all for this lesson. We've done all the modeling, we've done the look dev. The next step would be to go into rendering and actually produce final paint overs, and that is exactly what we're going to do in the next month reward. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and thank you so much for watching, and hopefully see you in the next one.